So now we are arriving at our final stop today, which is a conversation with two leaders in the science of reading. So first, Dr. Stephanie Staller is founder of Stephanie Staller Consulting and the creator of the Reading Science Academy. She is coming to us from Cincinnati, Ohio today, a part-time assistant professor in the online reading science program at Mount St. Joseph University, really passionate about improving educator knowledge and aligning school systems to prevent reading failure. And also joining us is Elizabeth Woody Remington from Vero Beach. She's one of the three original founders of the Learning Alliance up there. Liz has a BA in English Literature from the University of Delaware and a master's in special ed and learning disabilities from American University. So we are thrilled to have you both here. We know that you are immersed in the science of reading. And so my first question, I think, Stephanie, goes to you. What exactly is the science of reading?
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you for inviting me to be part of this fantastic event to support the wonderful work that you're doing. The science of reading is a vast body of research evidence that helps us understand how reading develops and happens for students, what can go wrong in the process of learning to read, and how we can prevent reading problems and also respond when students are struggling with reading. It's really a body of evidence that helps teachers and other educators not have to start from scratch, stand on top of what has worked in the past and do their important work in schools more efficiently and more effectively. So it provides a starting place for supporting students to become readers.
Great. Liz, anything you want to add to that?
No, I just want to also say thank you very much to Reading Pals. You guys are great. I want to be a Reading Pal now. And as always, Crystal, it's great to hear you speak. And I love that you invited everybody to get curious. And I think this event, really speaks to the people that are stepping in and getting curious around what is reading and what is the science of reading and why does it matter. And the campaign for grade level reading, when we started 12 years ago, we were three crazy moms and a philanthropist, but at the same time, Campaign for Grade Level Reading came on and said that third grade reading matters. So they've been with us on this journey for a long time. And it is so nice to have everybody tuning in and thinking about, that reading is a science and how do we support that? And I think you also beautifully demonstrated that, the bedrock to reading and early literacy is building those relationships and connecting to each other, connecting to the text. I always say reading is a connection project. And, that was demonstrated in all your videos, that creating that joy and that love of reading.
Well, it isn't being human a connection project. Liz, I want to stay with you for a minute. Why do you think it is so hard to get research-based practices into schools?
Okay, so this is the part where I bang my head against the wall. I think we've learned a lot in the last 12 years. And I can only speak to kind of our journey, what we have learned. I think the state of Florida is doing amazing work at a policy level. We have a 90% literacy goal, the state now threw that goal out. So it's an invitation for everybody to step in and step up. Time, deep knowledge and skills. Educators traditionally have not come out of teacher training institutions with the science. So there's a lot of rework that has to be done in the front lines. And then finding the time to do that, and it's expensive. One of the things that we're going to try to pilot in the fall, to speak to your volunteer work, is to try to get some of our good volunteers that are in the school to come in intentionally in large chunks of time to work with the students so that we can take the educators and then give them the knowledge and the skills that they need. I mean, and the coaching and support. It takes time and it takes really a lot of support to bring that into existence.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, maybe going back to you, Stephanie, what are some of the aspects of reading research that should guide our approach to new readers, to struggling readers? What does it actually look like?
So I think one of the most important findings in that body of research evidence is that reading is a language-based skill. It is all about understanding language from print, as well as you understand language that you hear. That's the whole enterprise. So, understanding that conversation, discussion, knowing word meanings, having lots of broad knowledge in general, that is one of the most important foundations of reading. So you really shouldn't minimize talking with children, narrating their actions, their play, expanding on their conversations and their statements, giving them access to unfamiliar words in your conversation and word choice. Reading is based on that oral language. That's one of the most important, I think, findings in the research. Another real guiding point and foundation from the research is that reading is not natural. We used to think that this is something that would just sort of blossom in children if we created the right conditions and the right environment around them. And we know now that that's not the case, that we shouldn't take the stance of let's wait and see. There's not some magical maturation point where children just sort of naturally acquire reading. We really need to be on the lookout for indicators and signs. Some have been mentioned in your conference here today about oral language, about letter knowledge, about word knowledge. Those are really important indicators. And if we have a sense as volunteers, as educators, as parents, that something might not be quite right, we could really do that child a good service by speaking up and seeking out support early rather than waiting to see how things might go. So reading as a language-based skill and understanding that it's not natural and it's okay to step in if we're seeing something that doesn't seem. Those would be two real priorities that I would want everybody to be aware of.
Yeah. Liz, anything else from your perspective you'd add to that?
No, that's well said, Stephanie.
That's it then. There's the science of
That's it.
reading that we
There
talked
it
about at the top.
There's a lot more to it, obviously, but those are biggies. We agree those are biggies.
And I think to Liz's point, there's a lot of ways that translates to the classroom that teachers need time to learn. What about parents? How can parents help their children at home? Is there a different approach to working with a young reader than we may have seen when we were growing up?
So I'll take that to start. One of the things based on kids being in school, we're seeing, and it was touched on, attendance matters, getting kids to school, but not only getting them to school, getting them to school on time. We are experiencing parents that the kids will come, but they'll come late. Most reading classes happen in the morning, so they're missing that critical time. So any campaign, any work around attendance. The other thing is we have a whole division that works with parents and families, and it's a read, talk, play, sing, create campaign, which is really setting the intention to build off of what Dr. Stoller said is, helping parents understand the power and the importance of reading to their kids, with their kids, talking, playing. Play is the work of kids, and creating things together from those experiences, building off of that emotional intelligence that Crystal spoke to. And that idea of creating empathy. What is the number one way in which we can grow empathy? It's to step inside the stories of others, and that's through books and through literature. So just supporting that, encouraging that. You guys get books into kids' homes. That's amazing. So
yes. Well, it reminds me, as I think about the Florida grade level reading campaign, I live in Miami-Dade County, and our campaign here has an initiative called Ready, Set, Go. The READ, and ready is all caps, of course, because it's a reading initiative, but they wanted to break down for parents of very young children exactly what you talked about, Stephanie, that oral language is the basis of reading. And so parents don't have to feel pressured to hold a book and point at letters and words, just activities that develop language and back and forth, that is literacy, and really making sure that message comes through. So I will share with our audience here. We do have some time. I forgot to say at the top of the presentation, we do have some time for some of your questions as well, if you have them. But Stephanie, I wanted to turn back to you and wonder if there are any other concrete examples. We just talked with Liz about parents, if there's something you want to add there, or anything, if you want to share an example of what this looks like for educators that may be different from what happened in a classroom 30 years ago.
Yeah, so always I'm going to emphasize the power of language. Parents should not think that that's too simple or too easy, that they need some program or materials. They should talk with their children, put down the devices, have a conversation, tell stories about your own life. If you are a multilingual family, it's fine and really important to develop oral language or literacy in a language other than English that will be supportive of that child when they get to school and learning to read and write in English as well. So conversation, really, really important. It may seem unusual to people that schools have moved away from teaching the letter sound relationships, what you might think of as phonics, directly and explicitly. And the research really indicates that that's where we should be emphasizing. That's a critical piece of becoming literate. It's not all there is to it, but it opens doors. And so anything that parents or educators can do to encourage print awareness, letter knowledge, the relationships between letters and sounds, and to play around with spoken language at the level of the sounds in speech. So, today is Monday and I'm your mommy, and both of those words start with and your lips tickle when you say right? So playing around with language in that way is really, really powerful in the classroom and for families at home.
I love that one. It reminds me of a conversation I had with 4-year-old Maya yesterday at in a VPK classroom in Palm Beach. And I was saying, Maya, the same first 2 letters as my name, Madeleine, and then I felt that I hadn't heard that tingling thing on the M. That's great. So Liz, we've got a question from Marie O'Brien over in your neck of the woods, who says, can one of you please explain the simple view of reading formula? Who wants to take that one?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So the simple view was developed by Goff and Tunmer, and it's been validated over 100 times, but it's not so simple. But it is a great way to start thinking about what is the science of reading. It's language comprehension times word reading equals reading comprehension. So the key there is the multiplication table. Those of us that do high math, we know that like anytime you have a multiplication table equation and any one of those on either side of that is 0, the net sum is 0. So to really hammer home the point that Stephanie is making, a whole part of this ability to get to reading comprehension, which is the goal of reading, is based on the ability to understand and use language, and then the ability to map sounds to print, right? To read words, to decode words. So that is the simple view.
Great. So someone was asking you to repeat, and I hope I got this right. Language comprehension multiplied by word reading equals reading comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
And it's in that book that we helped create with the Reading League. It is a little purple book that's I don't know if you can get the link to it, Stephanie, but that was developed in knowing that the science of reading was coming down the pike, and wanting to kind of grab hold of that language and put some real concrete definitions to it. so that people aren't running all over the place, because you see it's a word that's used all the time, but what does it really mean? What is the science behind it? And then what are the implications of that for me as a parent, as an educator, as a researcher, as a school administrator, as a community partner?
Yes,
It's a
absolutely.
question.
So powerful. And I'm seeing energy in the chat around this use of language, and particularly some of the sound beginnings training that FGLR has put out across the state, so that that first message, Stephanie, that you shared with us, that oral language is so important. It seems it's getting out there. I wonder too, and we've got the link there now to the book for anyone who wants it. I know we've also shared here in the chat an article from the New York Times on Kids Can't Read. And I think this is something you talked to John about before. Folks are hitting a paywall on this. We will share it after the fact. But is there anything, you must be very familiar with that article, is there something you want to comment on of the results from some of that work?
Well, I think what we're experiencing now in the US is increased awareness of the fact that we are not getting enough students to grade level reading expectations. And we've known that for a very long time. That's not news. But what does seem to be different currently is a sense of urgency around that. We're starting to, I think, finally reckon with the, in many cases, failure to implement what's known in the research in schools to the benefit of all students. So we have a lot of forces coming together. This conference is a demonstration of how powerful it can be when multiple entities come together around a common goal. And I think that's what that article is pointing out and elevating, that we have lots of different mechanisms to sort of influence change in reading outcomes. And so now's the time. This is like a really good moment and a really good opportunity to take advantage of this increased awareness and sense of urgency. And I feel optimistic and hopeful that we might finally get this right for kids. That's what we're all hoping for.
Yes, absolutely. And it reminds me too about just, it's all about relationships is what we hear again and again. And I can't remember if it was in this article or another one I read on the subject recently, but they talked about, you know, the communities in COVID that were able to keep reading scores higher. You know, there was a lot of learning loss all across this country, all across the world, where kids were out of schools, but the places where kids lost the least or continued gaining were where they had really strong relationships and community support. And it reminds us also that mental health is all about human connection. And, you know, you talk about the wellness side of that. And so really important, all of this that we're talking about. So let me just scan the chat one more time and see what we've got. So someone is asking, what about early writing as the partner of learning to read? Any reactions to that?
Yes, it is.
I think, oh, go ahead, Liz.
No, you go ahead. Yes, it is. Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, so writing is, I think, related to both of those components that Liz mentioned in the simple view of reading, and related to reading comprehension. So writing is integrated all throughout that research-based model, the simple view. And writing is, to me, the most complex outcome of literacy. You can't write about what you don't know. You can't write about what you've read if the reading is not automatic for you and fluent, the word recognition component. So early writing, it has the same two components. In the word recognition realm, students need to know how to correctly form the letters. It's really important, the handwriting component, how to hold the pencil. And that's not a compliance activity. It's not something we're forcing on children. It's because if you want them to eventually write an essay, the letter formation has to be effortless. And there's nice research that shows the connections, the brain connections that are related to that fine motor task and how important that is. So a step up from the letter formation would be spelling. Students need automaticity in spelling. It's the companion to reading and decoding. And it's the harder of the two tasks. If students can read words, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that they can correctly spell them. Spelling is that recall and more difficult task. And it also has to be automatic in order to have good written composition. And then the language comprehension piece that you put into the mix to produce good writing is having lots of knowledge, general knowledge about the world, knowledge of syntax in English, printed English, so that students know how to put their ideas together. Having that glue between sentences that comes from syntax and morphology, being able to write in different genres. Those are all sort of part of that language comprehension domain that's also essential. So writing's all throughout what we are supporting children to do.
Yeah.
I would just say for your audience of volunteers, proper pencil grip is critical, because kids, if not taught it, they will just gravitate to something. And then I see in the elementary schools, it's really hard to rework that. You can't. So that creates real inefficiency at the very basic level of holding a pencil, and then proper strokes for the letters. That would be something that I would push for the volunteers if they are engaging in writing with the kids.
Yeah.
And just because we are keyboarding and we have one-to-one devices in schools doesn't mean we don't want pencil grip and letter formation and spelling. It's still essential.
Right. Well, as you talk about all of that fine motor that goes into the writing, that feeds into the reading, it reminds me, why we talk about all the domains of development in early childhood, that, playing with sand or manipulatives or other things like that, working the muscles in the hand well before you have to learn that pencil grip, and all of that learning feeds into the rest. I'm thinking as I listen to you that as I've gotten to know the science of reading over the last couple of years, it's always been helpful for me to think about what is it not. And there was a lot of conversation in the Florida legislature this year about that. The science of reading was the focus of one of our committee meetings on the House education side. And there was a presentation from Dr. Kenyana Burke from Excel in Ed, who talked about 3Qing, like this whole idea of just have people guess a few times, is show a picture so they'll figure out what the word is. And that speaks to perhaps the way we used to think about reading as you described it, that it is something natural that happens. So I just make that observation. I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add to that, but the curiosity I'm left with as we continue this conversation is, how have each of you implemented the science of reading in your communities?
I'll jump off of your statement and question about the engagement in community. So some of the work that I'm doing now is related to teacher training, pre-service teacher training, supporting educators to bridge that gap between the science and the way that teachers are initially trained, and then also training the current group of teachers who are getting advanced degrees or participating in in-service training in their districts or through conferences. In terms of what the science of reading is not, for your group here today, one of the things that I would encourage you to think about related to your comment, it's not about using the picture to come up with what the word is. Any opportunity you have to direct children's attention to the printed word, we can talk about pictures. Pictures are a great part of the book. We should engage with the pictures. But if the student is trying to read something themselves, the best way that you can approach that is asking them to look at the word, maybe put your finger under the first letter. What sound does that spell? Thinking about sounding out the word rather than trying to figure out the word from a picture. And I know Liz will want to jump in on both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting to think about with your reference to the way traditionally we've thought about helping kids learn to read, looking at pictures, look at the shape. That's what poor readers do. poor readers look at pictures, they try to and they guess at a word, as opposed to really having a basic understanding of letters and sounds. Good readers look at every sound, every letter in a word, really, and they do it quickly to a level of it feels like they're reading the word as if by sight, but their brain is looking at all the letters and all the sounds. As far as what we do here in service of the science of reading, just like Stephanie, a lot of professional development in the schools, trying to really get curriculum in the schools that are based on the science, and then how to support that. Coaching isn't critical in the schools, getting interventionist in the schools up and running. Pre-service, it's the Read, Talk, Play, Sing, Create group. We have a moonshot puppet. We have a rocket that goes around, so we make it fun, but engaging parents in all the ways that we've discussed, like Reading Pals. We have a Moonshot Community Action Network, which is over 135 community partners that come together monthly around 7 bold ideas. So being very strategic and intentional around understanding what the work is that needs to be done and how people can step into it from the community. From the elected officials to the police force to all the nonprofits, just uniting everybody together. And I'll piggyback on Ralph Smith from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. You know, he says reading is not a spectator sport. It requires everybody to get out of the bleachers and onto the playing field. So that's what we aim to do. And I know that's what you all are doing with us and with everybody on this call.
Beautiful. I love that you mentioned the rocket, because it reminds me of the moonshot moment that you all talk about up in Indian River. That, you know, we're all familiar with the moonshot when this country decided that all production and effort was going to go into getting a man on the moon in a time period that was not thought possible, and that you and your community have set that moonshot as every third grader is going to be reading and bringing, like you say, electeds, police, volunteers, schools, all into that is so beautiful. So there's a question here about science of reading in Reading Pals training that I'll have to let John tackle another day or answer here in the chat. And I wish we could see Warren. He says their pre-K kids absolutely love the pinch and flip exercise for proper pencil grip. And so I'll have to YouTube that since he's not here on video to demonstrate it for us. But this has been a really wonderful conversation. I just want to close this conversation asking each of you if there's any tip or tidbit or something you really want our listeners, our audience here to remember today.
I would just say that I think we're very lucky in the state of Florida, because this is a national movement, and I think we are ahead of the game on it. And I you know, we have a legislation in a state that has set a moonshot moment goal, that those are their words. So I'm happy to let's blow up the rocket and bring it around to every community, and let's show the rest of the country how a state can come together and reach this goal and really build a literacy ecosystem.
Really great.
I would add that schools can't do it alone, that schools have a heavy responsibility and they need your partnership. So it's just really refreshing to me to see this kind of community effort. And I just want to encourage you to continue that. And if it seems sometimes like schools are standoffish or don't open their doors to you, to not be discouraged and to continue to try to build those partnerships. It's really, really important for children.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to both of you for really simplifying some of these concepts and bringing some tips that are relevant for our volunteers, whether they're working with the 4-year-olds or the 2nd graders. And we're really looking forward to exploring some of these tools as we go into the next Reading Pals year. So thank you again for being with us.